Hi, everybody. Happy Wednesday. This is Alexis with Recruiting Daily. Thanks for joining us. Um, we are here to spend the next 45 minutes to an hour, thanks to our friends at SAP, to talk about the future, helping to prepare you, making sure that you're ready and you're doing everything right. Because you're probably not. If you were, you wouldn't be joining us today to learn more. Our experts are Guillaume and William, which we just learned today. Guillaume is William in French. So for those of you who didn't know, this is awesome. We have the Williams with us today. I thought that was pretty spectacular to learn. So for those of you who didn't know, FYI. For those of you listening in, if you can't see, this webinar is brought to you by WorkConnect by SAP. WorkConnect helps make it easier for you to hire great people with simple job postings and candidate management. You can visit them at workconnect.us to learn more about WorkConnect and how it can simplify your hiring process right away. So go ahead and email them if you guys want to get a free demo and trial. contact@workconnect.io. Visit them at workconnect.us, and also please be sure to follow them on Twitter at WorkConnect. And before we jump into some things, we have a quick little video from them that we'd like to show you to get things started today.
Do you handle hiring and recruiting at work? Are you using a chaotic spreadsheet to stay organized? Now there's a way to simplify your hiring process. Easily post jobs, track candidates, and finally calm the recruitment chaos. WorkConnect by SAP.
Boom. Awesome. I love that little thing at the beginning. The little smiley makes me so happy. So for those of us that, those of you out there that may never have joined us on a webinar before, you can hear us, you can see what's going on, but we can't hear you. You are in audio mode only. So you'll see on your control panel there that you do have some options to raise your hand and ask questions. Please do not hesitate to do so. We are here to help. Let's see, without further ado, I am going to hand it over to one of the Williams to get started. And while you're following along with us today, please hashtag #OurDaily. And like I said before, don't forget to follow our friends at WorkConnect. And without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to one of the Williams, William Tincup. Here we go.
Thanks, Lex. Appreciate you. And again, just to reiterate the part about the questions, it's really important because the content that I've created today is kind of expandable. We can go up or down. I can go all the way to the full 60 talking about these things, or we can kind of bring it down to 40 and do 20 minutes of Q&A. So it's kind of up to you. Lex is going to be monitoring those things in the background, but as I talk or just as you have questions, please type them in. It just depends on how interactive you want the webinar to be, and of course, you as the customer, you get to drive. So the webinar today, I kind of broke out the content in 3 different ways. There's some steps, if you will, that most of us might know or might be aware of. I'd like to say that common sense is maybe not so common anymore, and so basic or foundational, maybe it's not as basic or foundational anymore. So I want to cover 11 of those. And then I want to parlay that into the 3 that I think are more or less intermediate or critical in order to get to that quality, speed, and price that we all want to get to in terms of hiring. So without further ado, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about the 11. So these are going to be the things that we walk through today, but I think the way that I want to preface these are the 11 that I think are important. You might have 20. So when you look at your own organization, you might take these, call them maybe a different name or 2, and you might add to it, or you might take some of them off the list because you already feel like no, we'll combine those 2 or etc. So I just want to talk about these 11. I'm going to walk through each of them and tell you some stories about why I believe they're important and what to look for in these steps. But I also want you to understand that it's important, at least for me to communicate, that I don't believe these are carved in stone. I believe these should be written in pencil. I've written them in pencil, and I want you to write them in pencil and then add to them, subtract from them, and come up with your own list. I think it's important to communicate. So without further ado, we're going to get into the 11. So, oh, sorry, I was too aggressive on that. Let's see. All right. So creating a best place to work, great place to work. So best place to work, great place to work are awards. Okay, and so what I don't want you to come away from is like, oh, I want you to go win awards. That's not really. I want you to separate the award part from the mindset. About a decade ago, I organized a business around best places to work. Like, what does it take to create a best place to work? And essentially, it comes down to three things. It's, basically at or above market compensation, at or a above market rate benefits, and at or above market experience or culture, and how the work gets done, if you will, or what it's like to work there. And so there's three pillars. When you're in HR and recruiting, you might not be able to directly impose your will, if you will. You might not be able to tell the leadership, we have to do this. However, it's important to drive towards this, the mindset of what is the best place to work, what is the preferred workplace, because you're going to spend the money. This is the kind of the thing that people don't get. If you're not a best places to work, you're going to spend the money in hiring and training and retraining and churn. And oh, by the way, morale goes down. So you're spending the money anyhow. You may as well make people's lives better. You may as well pay them better and give them better benefits and create a better experience and create a better culture for them. So I don't want you to think, oh, we got to go win awards. No, not really. In fact, if you do, that's great. If you don't, I don't think that that's the important part. I think as representative of the people human talent of our organization, I think it's important for us to communicate recruiting is easier, hiring is easier when you're a best place to work, because the game of retention has changed. Now what happens is people, they don't want to leave. They don't want to leave a great place to work. They don't want to leave a best place to work because they've got everything they want, and you're literally one of the best places in that area to work for. Like, why would career goes down if I leave? Why would I leave? So it's not just about attraction, and I know that right now we're thinking all about like how to attract the talent, but as we think about how to attract the talent, we also need to be thinking about how we retain the talent. Both are important. Both actually go hand in hand. And so creating a best places to work, again, it's a never-ending journey. If you are a best place to work, you've got to maintain that status. You've got to actually continue that status. You've got to actually keep innovating and keep adding to that to continue to be a great place to work. And I just want to make sure that you understand the mindset, and it's the mindset that you can control, because every day you come to work and you can convey that to the people that actually possibly could change things. So dropping these messages all the time, like I think we need to. Well, yeah, compensation and benefits, they cost money. Creating a great work culture, they cost money. It's like, well, let's do the math on retraining. Let's do the math on recruiting costs. Okay, if we do all that math and we do it true, I think you'll actually find it's cheaper to pay people at market rate and give them great benefits. So that's the first thing. That's one of the first steps that I want to make sure that we talk about. Second is, here's my formula for brand. And it's a pretty kind of simple formula, if you will. It's your culture versus your values plus the experience of what work is like there. And that's essentially what brand is. And brand can be, a lot of different things to a lot of different people. But again, representing the people human talent of the organization, you might not directly be able to manipulate these or manage these or to change these. I get that. I do understand that. However, you can talk about them, because this dramatically affects hiring. When we try to put something forth, what the VCs call lipstick on a pig, and that could be our culture or our values, or the experience at work, if you will. But basically, we tell the market one thing, and then those candidates find out something else. Okay, so it's the true up between those things, between what we tell people we are and what we actually are. And a lot of people will tell you, like, the experience that you feel with the receptionist or the shop clerk or the bus driver or anyone that interacts with that brand, that's actually the brand. You know, it isn't the CEO, it isn't the board, it isn't something lofty, it isn't words written on the back of a business card. It's the experience in which you have and how that relationship between your culture, your values, and the experience of work. So what can you do? Well, you know, simply you can reward people that actually fulfill on your culture, values, and experience. And you know what I'm talking about. There's people that just embody, naturally or not, they just embody your culture. You know, if you're setting up an office on Mars, these would be the people that you take with you to set up that office on Mars. So reward those folks. Find a way to actually incentivize and reward those people and thank them for what they're doing. And the opposite is true. And no one likes to talk about this. It's kind of a dirty little secret. But truth is one of the ways that you kind of get this aligned is you just don't allow the behaviors that are counter to your culture, values, and experience. So when somebody steps out and does something that's counter to those things, you slap them. You beat them back. Like, I mean, I know that sounds a little harsh, but, you know, if you don't, then everyone else will think it's okay. And then that's where you have a culture that kind of runs away and it gets farther and farther away from what we think it is. So managing your brand kind of sounds hard. It's not as hard as it sounds. It's what is your culture? What is it truly? What is it actually? Not aspirationally, what we want it to be, but what is it? It is what it is, you know. And whatever it is, let's render that. Let's tell people about what we actually are. And I like that. I like that the Wall Street Journal got it wrong about 1.5 years ago when they said Amazon has a bad culture. I believe strongly that Amazon has a culture that works for the people at Amazon. And it might not be the culture that I like. It's actually reminiscent of a lot of my friends that are in investment banking. It's, you know, a lot of smart people. They work really aggressive. They're working 120 hours and they push each other like, you know, not for me. Maybe not for you, but to say it's not right for anyone, that's actually not their place. So I thought they didn't do culture, the conversation on culture, a service by saying that there's a bad and a good and making Amazon look evil, even though they just bought Whole Foods and they probably are evil. But beyond that, no, I'm just kidding. The thing about the culture, values, and experience, you can control because you can instill the behaviors and reward the behaviors that are right. And the ones that aren't, punish. Okay, so there's my formula. You might want to add to that to make your own formula for brand, but that's mine. Clarity on the hire. Oh my goodness, I know that this is probably going through your mind right now as you listen to this, but it's actually most of the hiring that we see. It's like the target's moving as we're shooting at it, you know, whether or not it's a bow and arrow or a gun or whatever, but we're shooting at it and the target kind of keeps moving. We come back with a cluster of candidates and then the hiring manager said, yeah, none of these are good. It's like, okay. And you go ahead and get another cluster of candidates, you come back, oh no, these aren't any good either. Like, okay. So really having a kind of an adult and frank conversation with the hiring manager that just says, okay, let's just kind of get this down into nice to have, must haves. Let's really separate all the kind of the BS, if you will. What do you really need this person to do? And I think that having that frank conversation one-on-one with the hiring manager where you literally just go through deal killers, things that you just can't have. Okay, they can't work remotely. Okay. Done. Like, I'm not going to fight you on it, you know, unless we're having a esoteric conversation about it. But if you just don't want to work with somebody that's virtual, great. It's a knockout. Done. Next. Move on to the next thing. Like, you just need it to be true and accurate. And that target can't move. And this is the thing that we all suffer from. I've failed at this. Everyone on this call has failed at this. Is that the target can't move. It's okay if they don't know something. Like, that's okay. I'm not gonna punish someone because they just don't know it. But if they know it and they withhold it, yeah, I actually am going to be a little mad because you've wasted my time. So, and I don't like to waste my time. Nobody on this call wants to waste their time. So let's not do that. Let's have these frank conversations around what exactly do you want me to bring back from you? Because most recruiters that I know can bring back anything. Quite frankly, you ask them for a salmon, they can bring back salmon. You want barbecue? Great, they can bring that back. Like, they will bring back anything. But the hardest part of kind of one of the harder parts of what we do is when we bring something back and they change what they wanted based on what we brought back, or they didn't know, or maybe we didn't get enough clarity up front. So I don't want to always blame the hiring manager. I don't think that's fair to them. I want to make sure that this is a relationship between you on the recruiting side, the hiring manager, and clarity is the goal. That's it. So that's one of the steps I also think is important. So this is actually candidate facing, but I also think it's hiring manager, recruiter, sourcing as well. It's actual transparency. It's that idea of FedEx in recruiting where you know, and I think Domino's has done a pretty good job of this in the recent years, where you literally know Timmy is making your pepperoni pizza. Timmy is now boxing it up. Timmy is giving it to Ted. Ted's driving it to, Ted's 3 blocks from your house. Like that type of transparency, it works in the consumer market. Obviously, it works for FedEx or a Domino's. It should work in our market as well. Like, it's good for us to hold ourselves accountable to understand where they are in the process and to communicate to them, the candidate, but to also communicate to everyone else. Here's what's going on. Here's where you are in the process. I think this is kind of an issue where this isn't a nice to have anymore. This might have a couple of years ago been, you know, if we do it, that's great. Now, this is actually a must-have. You've got to actually do something like this. It might not be the Domino's example, but you've got to be more communicative. And I don't want to bring up any of the negative, but you know, all these folks are potential customers. They all have Twitter accounts, and they all can go to Glassdoor. So let's just, you know, if we want to talk about, you know, things that could go badly, if you treat them badly, which I believe not being transparent is tantamount to being treating them badly. If you treat them badly, they'll treat you badly. So, you know, this is one of those things that I know it's not easy. The technology is not easy. The process isn't easy. I get it. Like, I understand. But start with something basic. Start with communicating the basics of where people are, and you know, do it in clusters. Do it on week in, week out. On Fridays, I communicate all these people that are here. Here's where you're at. You know, like, do whatever you can to be more transparent. That's it, and push others in your organization to be more transparent about the hiring process as well. The more transparent you are, the more it'll pay off for you. Okay, and I know it's hard. I get it. I totally understand that, but you've got to push people. And push people and push people and continue to push people on being transparent. And this is obviously, this is just one of those things that, again, kind of like transparency, we've moved into an era where feedback is not a nice to have. People actually want to know how they're doing, not only where they are in the process, but what they could do to get better. And I think if we think of those candidates as people we want to have a relationship for life with, and I think this kind of goes back to something I learned in sales, is that you never lie. You know, which kind of, you're always honest. 2, you're brutally honest. 3, you want to have a relationship with that person for life. And if you think like that, like, you're not thinking about the transaction, you're thinking about the relationship. And I think, you know, recruiters are great at relationship building, and I think sometimes they think feedback is going to affect the relationship. If I tell this person something and I'm brutally honest with them, then somehow that's going to affect the relationship. I don't believe that. I think it's desired today from candidates that they want that feedback from you. They desire it. Actually, they kind of expect it, and that's where we've kind of gotten to is their expectations are different than our expectations. So we need to wrap ourselves around the candidates' expectations and give them what they want. And think about that long term. Like, I'm going to be talking to this person for 50 years. You know, what does that look like now? Now, what conversations do I want to have with this person if I'm going to have a relationship with them for 50 years? And if we think that type longitudinally, if we think that way, then we'll behave that way. And they'll give us feedback. How awesome would that be? Is if candidates said, hey, I like that you did this. I would rather that you text me that. You know, when we got to the offer letter, you know, I didn't understand this point. I would really like if you explained that or spent some time on that point. You know, like, Well, that'd be great. That'd be cool. Wouldn't that be awesome if we got feedback from candidates? Well, we've got to think of the long term. We've got to think of that long relationship. And again, people in your organization that don't think this way, get them to. Convince them, persuade them. Poke them with a stick. If they're just thinking churn and burn, they're not helping you. that it wasn't even a mentality, 20 years ago. And if it was dumb then, and it's extremely stupid now. So if someone else is doing this and doing it incorrectly, then change that. And again, you have that power. You have the power of prodding your peers into doing the right thing. Period, end of story. All right. So let's go on to the next one, which is interviews. I think that, oh, good gosh. I think when we think about interviews, we really kind of think one-dimensionally about our interview of that candidate. And I think that there's just better ways to think of interviews, and I think that we have to think collaboratively. Like the team interview, there's pros and cons to that. Like I get it, it's a lot of people's time and all that type stuff. But I think it's the collaboration that I like. Like when multiple people can talk to one candidate, whether or not it's in a group or separately, back to back to back, whatever. I like combining those perspectives. It's like it's almost like looking at history in a comparative state. JFK's assassination. Let's look at that 21 different ways. Like, well, let's look at the interview in the same way. Let's actually take it and look at it like it's a crystal and say, Matt saw this and Ryan saw that and Lex saw this and Jackie saw this, and we combine those to make a tapestry. Well, the only way we can do that is to have multiple inputs. So I don't want to put it forth and say, everything needs to be a group interview, because I've been sucked into a lot of terrible group interviews, so I get it. But I do like the collaboration. And however you can combine those viewpoints to get different vistas to kind of combine and collide to where you can kind of see a fuller view of that candidate, I think is better. So I also think, the fourth bullet point there, I think, we're moving to a world where it's kind of data first, instinct second, or experience or gut second. I like that, but I don't want to leave that off. That instinct stuff, I don't want to discredit that. I think we're in a rush to kind of think about data being everything, and I think that it actually could work against us where we forget what we've learned. And so I actually want you to trust your gut. I want you to trust your instincts. If you get a feel, like try to figure out why that feeling is there, of course, and use data. But use data, like really trust data, like I love that, and then trust yourself. And I don't want to lose that. I don't want to lose the humanity of hiring, if you will. And lastly, knockout questions. Again, I think this gets back to that, job description, clarity of the hire. I think you got to really know, like, what can't you accept? What is the thing that you can't accept? My favorite interview question, at least currently, I've changed through the years, but my current favorite is, we're all misunderstood. How are you misunderstood? And I love the response, and I don't really care what they say, just between us. I don't really, the response isn't important to me. It's actually how they process the question. How they look at the question and deconstruct it and put it back in front of me in whatever form. That's the more interesting part for me. And I don't really care about like their answer. I care about how they go about the question and how they tear it apart and bring it back to me. So what is your knockout questions? This is for you. This is your, the hiring team, your hiring manager, everyone. Like, what are the things you cannot accept? And knowing that and being able to ask that and articulate that is critical. And again, these are your basic foundational steps. We'll get to some intermediate stuff here in a second. So one of the things that I wanted to kind of bring up in this step is that you're an advocate. As you're a recruiter, you're a hiring manager, sourcer, recruiter, everything on that value chain, if you will. You're an advocate for the candidate. You're an advocate for the brand, the job, the hiring manager, and the leadership team. And you can keep going if you want. Like I could have kept going and added more to this, but you're an advocate for a lot of different things. So you have to put on a lot of different hats. And recognizing that you're an advocate, you're a cheerleader, you're responsible to kind of position things a certain way, you have to do that with the candidate and say, listen, I understand, here's your strengths, here's what I think that I'd like to tell the hiring manager about your strengths. So I'm going to be an advocate for you. Now when you're talking to the hiring manager, I'm going to be an advocate for you, and here's what I believe is important. So you're kind of a psychopath. Just kidding. You've at least got multi-personalities where you jump into these advocacy roles in and out, and possibly even in conversation, where you can go from one role of advocacy to another role of advocacy. But it's important that you understand how you're being an advocate, and it's not one-dimensional. You're not just an advocate for the job. That's first of all, it's simplistic, and it will get you in trouble. You're an advocate for much more than just that job opening or job rec. You're an advocate for all kinds of other things. That brand, that culture, those values, all of those things kind of come together like gumbo, and just recognizing at the different points where your advocacy lies and where it doesn't. Where are the lines? Where are the cutoffs? Where's the lines of demarcation of that advocacy? So that's a step I think is important for us to know. This having a development plan is critical these days with folks under 30. Okay, Guillaume was just telling us that he heard a stat yesterday that millennials have, or Gen Z has an attention span of 8 seconds, which I find fascinating on so many levels, because it's just how do you talk in 8 seconds? How do you get to the point in 8 seconds, right? I can barely get to the point in an hour. So I know that the folks coming up, the folks under 30, there are a couple things that are changing the role of recruiting in the world of recruiting that we know. One is 20 years ago, let's just say, I would have never asked what's next in an interview. So if I was interviewing for a VP of, sales or whatever, I would have never said, okay, this looks good, 18 months, I'm going to do this, be successful, what's next? What do I got after this? It would have been perceived as disrespectful. And first of all, I would just never thought the thought. And that's not just me, that's whether or not it's generational or just whatever. I would have never asked, and if I did ask, I would have looked like a complete, a pariah, if you will. So the folks coming to the jobs today, and the interviews that are happening right now, they're asking what's next. So recruiters actually have to answer a what's next question, which is a part and parcel career development. It's part and parcel internal mobility. It's basically having an idea of what you're going to do next with that person. And I think it's fascinating because it's changing recruiting. It's changing the role of recruiters. They're having to actually learn more about HR and more about what happens after the hire and after the onboard, because that's generally where we stop. The line of demarcation has generally been onboarding. And yeah, we might keep track of them, down the road, but really after onboarding, we were on to something else. Well, that's all great in a world where they're not asking what's next. Now we have to be able to answer the question because the candidates are asking. So the candidates are actually driving change for the profession of recruiters. And to not recognize that is, we do that at our peril. So we have to recognize that, we have to plan for that, we have to train for that, we have to get folks ready to be able to answer those questions. The second thing that gets asked by folks under 30 is, how are you going to make me better? So again, 20 years ago, wouldn't have asked that question. I would have assumed I would have made me better. I would have assumed I would get in and I'd figure it out, and and we'd figure it out. Now, not so much. You've got to answer that question, which is about skills development, training, learning, and development. And combine all of those things together, and there's a plan. What are we going to, Susie comes in, we love Susie, she's going to be an all-star, great. Susie wants 2 things from us. What's she going to be doing next, and how are we going to make her better? And those aren't bad questions. Like, I don't want to position that like, oh my God, I hate this. I actually like that they're asking these questions because I think it's good for us. It's pushing us, it's changing our profession. However, I think it's actually good for us to be able to answer these questions, to be able to look Susie in the eye and say, okay, Susie, yeah, we're thinking about this. Here's what we think your career path looks like. And those different steps, here's what we think training-wise, we got to put you on this path. Okay, and it might change. That's fine, but at least we're starting with a path. We're starting with an idea of where you're going next and what you're going to do next, etc. So the last part there is set some expectations and learning what are the expectations of the firm. Like, again, I don't want you to lie. In fact, I don't want you to lie at all. I want you to tell the truth. If you don't know, tell them you don't know. Just understand you're probably not going to be able to recruit great talent if you don't know. So I don't want you to lie, but I do want you to I do want you to tell them your version of the truth. And now I think it becomes an issue for the organization of how do we develop these things? How do we develop internal mobility? And how do we develop training and development and learning paths and things like that? So again, if we want to recruit the best talent is changing. The best talent is poking us with a stick and saying, these are the things that are important to us. It's up to us to respond to that. So the thing with reference checks, I would tell you, and this is really important, again, mindset more than anything else, is don't respond to the references they give you. So I'm just going to be brutally honest, if y'all don't mind. Yeah, if they hand you a list of people, just assume that they've kind of worked it out with those people, that they're going to say great things about them. Like, that's what you would do, that's what I do, that's what everyone would do. So just assume that those people are going to say kind and generally speaking, great things about that person. You need to source references like you source candidates. Okay, I want you to go into those former jobs, that former alumni network, everything, and look for the people that have worked with, worked for the people that they've worked for. Look for other people and get those folks on a call. And the faster you can get the brutally honest, the better for everyone involved. And also, I would say, don't let them drive. When you call someone that you're trying to suss out, is this what this person telling me true? That's what you're trying to suss out, right? So when you do that, you've got to get to that truth. And that person might have a version of the truth that you're interested in, but letting them drive and say, oh, tell me about Susie. Like, you need to drive that. You've got to actually ask the probative questions of them to find out, is Susie's version of the truth, is it true? Is it real? Is it believable? And does this particular person buy off into that version of the truth? So I want you to think about reference checks. Again, this is something that's basic, been around for 100 years. But the problem with that is we still do it much to our chagrin. We still do it the same we did 50 years ago. People hand us a list, we call it a list. And so I want you to stop that. That's just a terrible practice. So just stop doing that. B, I want you to think about those references differently. And as aggressive as you are in sourcing candidates and great candidates, I want you to source like that for references. Okay? So this is getting a lot of airtime these days, people, candidate experience, etc. But I really want to think of it more like a journey and what they do and what you want them to feel, what you want them to think, what you want them to smell, all of that stuff as they go through. Like, what is that path that you want candidates to go through? And how can you control the path? Well, what can you control? So on some, you'd be amazed at how many people don't apply to their own jobs. Like, it's just kind of a funny bit. Like, if you ask somebody, like if you applied to your own jobs, probably 60% of the people you ask would say no, and probably even higher than that. It's remarkable to find out how many people haven't done it. So that's just like a simple thing, right? Apply to your own jobs. Just go create a Hotmail account or whatever, and go apply to a couple jobs and walk that walk and see what you see. And is that experience good for you? Do you feel like that's a good experience? Because if you feel like it's a good experience, it's probably generally a good experience. But if you get through it and it's like, oh my gosh, this is horrible. Well, if you feel that way, imagine the thousands of candidates that came before you that felt that way. So the goal in an experience, this journey, if you will, is to create delight. And I want you to think like that. So like, it's in some ways we got to rip off pages of the people that do consumer, like restaurants. So think of your favorite restaurant. What's that experience like when you book a table, when you first show up, when you talk to the maitre d', when you order, after the check comes, when you order direct, like all of that stuff. What does it smell like? How do they treat you? How do they interact with? Like, that experience, that's all been carefully created. manipulated, if you will, in so far as you have the experience that they want you to have, generally speaking. Well, doing that for candidates is critical. That's what we've got to think about, is like, what do we want them to feel, and at what points do we want them to feel that? And the last thing is, kind of the statement, but let's just make sure that our candidate experience and candidate journey is mobile friendly. So again, as you apply to your own jobs, do it both on a desktop, do it on an iPad, and do it on a phone. And try all of those to see where it hiccups. And no one's got this perfect. So let's just let's stop down for a moment. Like, nobody does all of this in a perfect way. There's hiccups everywhere. Even your best and favorite companies fail at some of this stuff. So if we're at this part of the webinar and you're like, oh my God, we're not doing any of this, or we're not good at this, that, and the other, don't feel bad. That's not the point. The point is these are some of the basics that you just want to make sure that you shore up. And so now that you know, go do it and shore them up. So, this reputation thing, we are in an era of transparency. We have to recognize that we're in this era, and your reputation is going to precede you, no matter what. And now it's just a matter of, do you own your reputation? Is it really a kind of a game of other people own your reputation? And when Glassdoor first came to market, we feared it in a lot of ways. Like, oh, it's just disgruntled employees telling bad stories about us. It's like, kinda-ish. It's a version of the story. It's a narrative. It might not be a narrative you like, but to not participate in it, you do it at your own peril. So participate in that narrative, and I say, own it. Again, like, go back to the Amazon story earlier. If you've got that type of culture, hey, we're aggressive. Hey, we work hard. Hey, we value IQ, and not as much EQ. We push each other really hard. We're more like an investments bank. That's who we are. Like that. That's who we are. And you know what? This isn't for everyone. It's so true of Nike, so true of Amazon, so true of Walmart. So true of every company. So it's just tell that story and own your own reputation. Do it in Glassdoor, do it in Google, and I think importantly, do it with your alumni. So when people leave, if you will, whether or not it's their choice, our choice, when they leave, they're just as important to us as when they were a candidate. And that's a hard thing to think about, so just let me stop down for a second. Thinking about what we want that candidate journey to be, in the last slide where we kind of architect how we want them to feel, we have to do that with alumni. When people leave, and again, it doesn't matter if it was our choice, their choice. What do we want them to feel? How do we interact with them? How do we participatory in the rest of their life, and how are they participatory in the rest of our life? Because these are the folks where we can manage that experience in a much more robust way, and we won't have a lot of that negativity come out via Glassdoor or otherwise. So, one of the things I would tell you is we need to spend more time, money, and energy in managing our alumni. And that's some of that's process, some of that's software, and some of it's just mindset. Like many companies that we all love, when you leave, you're dead. Like, it's just done. Relationship over. Again, doesn't matter if we chose, you chose. Dead. It's a bit simplistic. It's also in a world that isn't as transparent as the world we occupy. So I think maybe at one point you thought, well, we'll never see this person again, so what? Again, now all those people, they all have mobile phones, smartphones, Facebook accounts, their access to, everything, the internet. They can go tell your story. And they will go tell your story, with you or without you. So why not make it with you and make it easier? The last note is I would, because people consume content in a lot of different ways, one of the things I would advise is to think about your content strategy on your reputation, and think about how you mix in all the different forms of content. So again, getting back to that attention span issue, but also how we consume content. And you're going to want to have a kind of a multi-pronged approach to content, where you say, yeah, we're going to put videos together, or CEO is going to give the State of the Union. We're going to have some audio podcasts from hiring managers. Like try all different forms of content, not for just the sake of trying different content, but because people learn differently. We have both learning styles at play and learning differences at play. So if we only just put narrative content out there, again, we're only going to reach the people that care about that. So think about content a little bit differently as we think about our reputation. But, you know, at the end of the day, and I think the long and short of reputation is own it, period. So those were kind of basic steps. And I want to go through 11. Again, you could have 20, you could have 80, you could have 2. You know, whatever your basic foundational steps are in recruiting, those are you. They're kind of like a glove that fits you and just you alone, like kind of like OJ. Just kidding. So so what we're now going to talk about is things that are outside of the basic. These are more the intermediate and how we get to price, quality, and speed. And I'm going to give you some suggestions on what we can do to get to price, quality, and speed. And the first thing we're going to tackle is referral hiring. So referrals are like this. It is one of the holy grails of HR to do employee referrals because, as we all know, it reduces our recruiting costs. If we have our employees are so happy, so engaged, they so love us, again, that culture, values, experience, that brand, and they recommend people, everything gets easier. Okay? Now, how do you create that? That's the hard part. And your job is to make sure you're communicative with the leadership team and to everyone that the goal is to create referral hiring, because that's how you get your cost of hire down. That's one of the ways to get your cost of hire down and to get price in line. So I wanted to say a couple things about referrals because it's important to kind of put some context around referrals. What we see in the referral market is this. Your best talent, and again, this can be called high performers, high potentials, A talent, whatever, however you phrase it. At the end of the day, HR believes strongly that 80% of the value comes from 20% of the workforce. Whether or not that's true or not, I don't know, but they believe that. That 20% is that type of talent. What you really want is those folks to refer, okay? That's the people you want. That's the gold. You know, you can get some silver, bronze from B talent and C talent referring. They might know some people that are A talent, but chances are they don't. They hang out with other C and D and B talent. So what I would say on some level, esoteric or otherwise, not all referrals are equal. Okay, to treat them as equal, not good, not smart. Because what you'll end up with, if you have a bunch of C and D talent referring, you're going to end up with a firm that is horrible. Because they're just going to refer a bunch of C and D talent, and that's a pathway to bankruptcy or a pathway to making yourself insolvent, or there's nothing good. Let's just be honest about that. So what we need to do with referrals is to understand and grade them like we grade leads. You know, leads on the business development and sales side of things. We grade leads. There's called lead scoring. There's a whole entire methodology to lead scoring. We need to do the same time and apply the same logic to referrals. Okay, and then we need to figure out. These are all buttons that we have to push, levers that we have to pull. That what works with that talent, the talent that we most want referrals from, programmatically and incentives-wise. Like, what does it take to get A talent to refer in other A talent? Because they know them. They went to school with them. They hang out with them. They're in their network. Like, they know other A talent. They know. So what do we got to do to activate those folks to bring other A talent to our firm? And that is a game of, it is a game of incentives and putting, it could be money, could be as simple as money. You know, if you refer a friend and they get hired, we're going to give you $10,000. Sounds like a lot. Well, actually it isn't. not for a great hire, it didn't. So I want you to think about what it takes. First of all, who are those people in your firm? So I want you to kind of go and look at your firm and go, who are these people? Great. Now, what do I got to do to build a relationship with these people? And what is it going to take for them to get me what I want? Because that right there is the game. If we want to drive down recruiting costs, that's it. Go find those people, find out how to, pull the levers to get them to do what you want, and have those people recommending that talent. It makes your job better, makes your life better, makes it easier, and oh, by the way, you have great talent. So, and again, I'm making it sound easy, right? It's not. I get it. I absolutely understand. This is, again, they call it one of the holy grails of HR. Yeah, it is. It really is. It's that hard. But it gets easier if you think about it, and it gets harder if you never think about it. It gets farther away from you. So I want you to think about it. I want you to give it some pause, take the weekend, and really think about what we can do to activate that audience. Secondly, quality. I think you get to quality by combining a lot of different assessments. So I think the way we get to quality of hire is to actually kick out the people that just aren't going to make it. So how do we know who's going to make it and who isn't? Well, we got to create a baseline. So let's say we're hiring for a sales position, but we know who the high performers of sales are. Well, let's go create a baseline, a battery of assessments. And again, I want to know EQ, IQ, I want to know behavioral personality, I want to put them in scenarios, I want all of it. And I want to create that baseline, and then I want to go put that out as far as I can in the hiring process to knock out the people that just aren't going to make it. Because I don't want to interview 1,000 people. I want to interview 10, but 10 that have made it through the gauntlet. So how do we get to quality? One way we get to quality is we make it actually harder to get in. And here I hear myself saying that, and I also hear some people laughing as I'm saying that, but that's essentially how you get to quality. You make it harder. You don't make it easier. Easier gets you less quality. You actually want to make it more rigorous. And the rigor I think that we apply is the rigor of all of our assessments combined and making a battery. Like, we're going to put you very early in the process. We haven't even talked. We're going to put you through a battery of assessments. If you make it through that, then yeah, we'll talk, or we'll move to the next step. If you don't make it through that, we're not going to waste any more time with you. You would never make it in our firm because you're not going to be on the baseline. You're not even, 1 to 2 deviations away from the baseline. Like, we're just not going to hire you. We know that because of our baseline. So I believe one of the ways that we get to quality is to combine all, and there's 10,000 different assessments. A lot of it kind of comes down to pulling those together, the ones you really like Hogan Assessments is a personality assessments. They've been in business for 30 years. So they probably have pretty good understanding of personality. Okay, well, so we take them and we use that for the personality. And then we go to the next one. Okay, let's go and look at an EQ assessment. Let's look at a great culture fit assessment. Let's put all these battery of assessments together, and that becomes your gauntlet. And I want you to create gauntlets. And I want those gauntlets to be, I want you to communicate. I want you to be transparent. I want people to know what you're doing. There's no need to hide. Tell them the truth. We're going to put you through 8 assessments. If you care to go through them, and if you go through them, you make it, we'll talk. If you don't, okay, well, we still love you. Godspeed, little minnow. So that's one way to get to quality. And thirdly, speed. So most people know me as a person that studies the HR talent acquisition products, and I am. I've studied the space for 17 years. I absolutely love the intersection between technology and HR. I spent my life doing it. I don't think I'm going to do anything else outside of winning the lottery. I love it. But I would tell you, and I'll be very honest, brutally honest with you, process always wins over product. Always. If you have great process, you can essentially put an inferior product on an exceptional process and still win. You can't do the opposite. So I care about products. If this isn't a chicken and egg discussion for me, process comes first, products come second. That's it. So what I want you to do with your processes is I actually want you to look at every single one of your processes, your entire talent acquisition process, all the way to onboarding, we'll say. Everything. Sourcing, interviewing, just keep going through and finding all the 36 different processes. And I want you to review those, and I want you to innovate those, and I want you to change those and morph those every 6 months. Literally put it on a calendar and make it something that you're doing nonstop throughout the year. January, we're doing interview process. Great. Let's tear it down, let's build it back up. And a great way to kind of go about that is to grab your team and say, if we weren't already doing it this way, how would we do it? And let's get to the innovation. Let's find out how we would do it, and let's go try it. So it is kind of a thing where you lay down where you're doing it, you challenge how you're doing it, you make additional changes, subsequent changes, innovations, etc., and then you try that. And you put it on a time limit, and you try that for 6 months, and then you come back to it. More often than not, we set a process, and we walk away. And turns out everything has changed. It changed pretty fast. So the candidates are changing. Technology is changing. Hell, our team's changing. Everything's changing. So one of the things I would tell you is that, process, if we want to get to speed, then we're going to become process engineers. And we're going to be looking at process all the time. Like, that is a part of the job, is being a junkie around process and processes. So I learned this. My office years ago was training for a triathlon, and the biking and running didn't intimidate me, but the swimming did. And a good friend of mine, Greg Moran, who's the CEO of Outmatch, is an Ironman triathlete, just an amazing athlete. And I told him about this, at dinner one night. I said, "Man, I'm terrified about this swim thing. I can barely swim across the pool." And he said, "Here's the deal about swimming. You go slow to go fast. So while you're swimming, you literally slow yourself down to think about the stroke and to think about the kick and to think about your breathing. And as you're thinking about it, you're slowing down, and that'll make you go fast." And it stuck with me. Well, that was like a decade ago. That stuck with me, and I think that's our mindset around process. We need to be thinking about every one of these processes, tear them all the way down, think about them, go slow, build them back up, and I think that's how we get to speed. I think that's how we get there faster. So we've got about 10 minutes left. I want to go through just one more slide. So combining these things, so as we look at our basics, and as you're going to create a list of your basics, and we look at the intermediate steps, and you're going to create your own list of those intermediate steps, I think the advanced kind of play out like this. We have our foundational layer of recruiting and hiring. Okay, those have to be solid. We have to continue to innovate and to go back to these things more often than we probably already do. And I think the game becomes being honest with ourselves about where we are with these basics. Are we poor? Are we average? Are we good? Are we great? And continuing to move across those things. So if let's take employee referrals. Let's say right now we're average. Okay, that's okay. Actually, it's totally fine. How do we get to good? What do we got to do? What's our team got to do? What type of executive buy-in do we have to? What type of tools, process? Like, everything's on the table. What do we have to do to get good at employee referrals? And once you do that and you sustain that for a little bit, how do we get to great? Okay, and that's with all of your basics, and that's also with all your intermediates. It's the same process. You've just got to identify what are your basics, and then start thinking of them both as the spokes that they are, and then what you've got to do to make them better as it relates to poor, average, good, or great. And again, you can come up with your own. If you don't like poor, average, good, or great, come up with your own. That's okay. Like, I want this to work for you, and if you've got to change it to get it to work for you, that's fine. But this is essentially how you get to price, quality, and speed. You get there by nailing your basics, nailing the intermediate, the harder things, if you will, and then constantly innovating and grading. Okay? So we are going to, I think Lex is going to take us back over. We're going to do some Q&A. On the left-hand side is my bio. Not that you care, but there's my bio. More importantly, on the right-hand side of the screen is my contact information. I'm an advocate. And I'm also, I would say, a resource. I wouldn't say a great resource, just kidding, but a resource. If you have any questions, you want to take things offline, or you want to take them into a different medium, I'm pretty easy to find on the internet, but if not, here's some other ways that you can find me. So, Lex?
Awesome. Thanks so much. I was trying to wait. My dog was crying in the background. You did such a great presentation. He's beside himself. But we did have a couple questions come in, so we'll take a few oh, hello. So just another quick reminder about our friends at SAP and Work Connect that made this all possible before we hop into some more questions. So just in case you guys didn't get any of the information at the beginning, copy it down here. And as another reminder, I don't know if I mentioned at the beginning, we will have a copy of this recording available within 24 hours. So nobody worry if you have to jump off or had to jump off early. We'll make sure you get everything that you need. So with that, let's go ahead and talk about some questions here. So, Tincup, a question that came in regarding feedback after an interview.
Mm-hmm.
So what about the idea of protecting the company from things like potential lawsuits?
Okay, so answer that in this way. How do you want feedback? So everyone that's a recruiter or in hiring anywhere on that value chain is also a candidate elsewhere. And think about it like that for just a minute. Okay, if you're working at Google, you're a candidate at Facebook. Okay, you're a candidate elsewhere. And so how would you want feedback? So am I asking you to tell them that they're ugly, or no? Of course not. But you can tell them, hey, here's one of the things that we grade on is appearance. You know, people that wear the right outfits, people that care about their appearance, people that care about this, that, and the other. So do I want you to do anything that's illegal? No. Do I want you to do anything that would get you jammed up with the company? No. Or the company jammed up in any legal way? Oh, hell no. But I do want you to think about feedback as a way of brokering your version of the truth to them. So not an option. Okay, just because we're scared or we're intimidated that, oh my God, the company might get sued. Well, yeah, okay, that sounds legit, but it could be used as a cop-out because we don't want to give them feedback because we don't want to hurt their feelings. And I don't want you to hurt their feelings like for sport, but I do want you to tell them your version of the truth because they'll never get better if you don't. And again, like if you went from one job to another, and you would want that feedback too. You would want somebody to say, hey, here's the deal. You know, we like people to look us in the eye. Like I'll tell you a ding on William Tincup. I'm speaking of myself in the third person at this point. Is I don't really look people in the eye. I didn't grow up that way. I grew up in a family that listens and looks down, and so they focus on the listen word, and they don't look at people, and so that's also oftentimes I get dinged for that. People are like, I didn't understand this guy, you know, talking to him, he didn't look me in the eye. I'm like, well, I didn't look at you in the eye because I was paying attention to what you were saying. So it's cultural, is what I would tell you. But if someone were to tell me that after an interview, like, hey, we value people that look each other in the eyes, then if that job were really important to them, then I'd figure out how to change. You know, that's the thing. If there's a humanity there that I'm really asking you to kind of get to when you do feedback.
Great, that's awesome. Okay, let's see. We got still a couple more minutes, so we can get a couple more, maybe one more question, depending. What about? Well, you kind of got into this a little bit with personal preference and stuff, but what about people when you get into the side of their sourcing their references? If you had mentioned, you know, if you can source a candidate, you can source references, but what about people being entitled to their privacy? How do you feel? What do you think about that?
Well, if they put it on the internet, it's not private. So, I mean, this is you work backwards, right? If you put your LinkedIn bio out there, it's not private anymore. If you said that you worked at this company at the time that they worked under the same manager, that's no longer private. And so really, again, bring it back to, hey, we're just trying to do a great job and make a great hire. We like Susie. She looks fantastic. Looks like you work together. Want to get your take. That's it. You don't want to give us your take? No worries. We'll find someone else to give us their take. But we want to get your take on Susie. So I don't think that you get jammed up there. I think you get jammed up if you only call the list, or worse than that, don't call anybody. I think that's the first one. We'll start there. Don't call anybody. Okay, that's like playing Russian roulette with hiring. 2, calling the list that they give you. That's just lazy. 3, do you upset somebody? Well, you know, if they're upset, they're upset. You know, but you're still doing the right thing. When you do the right thing, don't worry about if they're upset. You know, that's okay. People get upset about real strange things. Don't worry about that. Stop concerning yourself about how people get upset and do the right thing. And you sourcing out whether or not that's a good fit, if Susie's a good fit or not, that's the right thing.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, you want to. I mean, if you're trying to put the right person in the position, then you're gonna. If you want to do your job and do it well, then you're gonna go above and beyond. You're not just gonna do the bare minimum.
That's right.
Duh. Awesome. Well, that's great. I mean, and we're just about at the mark of an hour here, so I want to thank you again, William. And we didn't really even meet the other Guillaume, William. So I think we did quite all right filling the space today. Guys, thank you again for joining. I'm going to get this recording up and out there as soon as we have that available. Thank you so much. William, was there anything else that you would like to say before we wrap up for the day?
No, I just really want to thank the folks at Working at by SAP. I really like what they're doing. I really appreciate SAP going into a market, kind of a downstream market, 1,000 employees and below, because it's not where people generally think about SAP. And I can't wait for them to develop more things, put more things in their store. So I think it's just, first of all, take a look at what they're doing. If you're an SAP customer, and even if you're not, just take a look at it, because I just think what they're doing is actually fascinating from a brand perspective and from an audience perspective. So I want to thank them for hosting this webinar and having us in front of you all.
Great, and I did throw this one slide back up that had some of their information on it, just in case anybody else again wanted to jot it back down. And again, thanks everybody for joining. We'll have this up on the site soon. Enjoy the rest of your week. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.